Hello, welcome to a special interview with Professor Jean Drèze. And Jean Drèze is a development economist. He is one of the most eminent development economists who has been working in the field of poverty elevation, rural employment generation, gender, then development for the marginalized section of the people. So, all his economic studies, he is concerned mostly with the rural poor and also the employment generation, economic equality. And once Professor, actually, he was the finance minister of Bengal, Ashok Mitra. Ashok Mitra was telling me that okay, economics has become all mathematics. So I'm not interested in mathematical economics. I want to deal with economics as a political economy, which affect the life of the people. So I'm so happy that you have agreed to spare some time for the audience of Northeast Now, and particularly to share your views in the recent that the government uh, of India recently. They have replaced Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment is a Guarantee Act with another act. Now, my first question to you is actually I would like to know a little bit about the MGNREGA. Now, you and I think uh, Mrs. Rai, both of you are very actually involved at the beginning when the bill was at the stage of drafting. So I would like to know a little bit more about the origin of this bill, about the background of the bill, so that our audience can actually locate it properly. So I welcome you
Right.
once again for this interview.
Thank you very much, Paresh. Thank you for inviting me. This is a very important topic for the Northeast because several Northeastern states have had high levels of employment under the Employment Guarantee Act, and also some of them have made quite good use of this opportunity to not only provide employment but also create some productive assets in rural areas. I saw some of it in Sikkim, and I was quite impressed by what I saw there. And I think some other northeastern states also have a reasonably good record of implementing this critical act. So it is an important topic for the Northeast. Coming to your question about the origins. So, there's a long history to employment guarantee in India, as you would
It's
know.
important. It is important to know that history.
Yeah, I can only speak with authority about the part that I was involved with myself, which starts around 2000. But briefly, before that, of course, there was a very important precedent in the form of the Maharashtra Rural Employment Guarantee Act. We should never forget that
Yes,
Maharashtra
yes.
really showed the way. And there's an interesting parallel in the way in which the Maharashtra Employment Guarantee Act came about in the 1970s and the way in which the National Rural Employment Guarantee Act came about in the early 2000s, 2005, but the movement began before that. So in both cases, it happened in the aftermath of a drought. In Maharashtra, there was a very severe drought in the early 1970s. And in 2001, 2002, 2003, there was again a severe drought in especially Rajasthan in Western India. And in India, droughts, of course, are a time of great distress, but there are also times of public intervention and also of churning, political and social churning, because there's a lot of mobilization that takes place around drought relief and the demand for relief and so on. So in Maharashtra, in the early 1970s, there was an enormous drought relief operation in the form of mainly of public works. with something like 1 billion person days of employment being generated in the peak year, which is like, it's almost like half of the National Employment Guarantee Act in a single state. So there were huge numbers of people working on relief works all over the place. And I guess this is what led to the idea that it could become a permanent approach to Social Security, that you guarantee employment to anyone who wants to work at the basic wage. And similarly, during this drought in 2001, 2002, 2003, especially in Rajasthan, there were again large-scale relief works, and there was again a process of mobilization, the formation of Akal Sangharsh Samiti, which was a kind of coalition of organization in Rajasthan committed to demanding appropriate relief. Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangathan, of course, was also active, and then the Right to Food campaign began in 2001, 2002. So it was a time of mobilization and again a new awareness that employment guarantee could be a permanent thing and not just a relief method. So the idea was revived and made its way in different forums. And then in the run-up to the 2004 elections, the Lok Sabha elections of 2004, some of us, aside from discussing the idea among ourselves and also drafting the first version of the National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, we took this idea to different political parties, and the Congress in particular expressed interest. We must remember that the Congress did not expect at all that they would do well in those elections. In fact, everyone expected the Congress to do badly. So in a way, they were not committing themselves to very much by putting this idea in their election manifesto. So they did it, perhaps with less deliberation than they would have done if they had known that they would win. But anyway, they put it in the manifesto, and some Congress leaders were quite attracted to the idea and quite convinced with it, including Mrs. Sonia Gandhi. So then when the Congress actually did so well and won the elections and formed this UPA coalition, in which the left parties, of course, were also very important, and the left parties were completely supportive of this idea of an Employment Guarantee Act. Then the Employment Guarantee Act became one of the items program, the CMP, that was the foundation of this UPA alliance. And in a sense, it became a kind of test of the credibility of the alliance. And on top of that, both the Prime Minister Manmohan Singh and Mrs. Gandhi had this odd idea, this strange idea at that time, that if we have promised something, we have to do it. Nowadays, electoral promises are taken with some seriousness sometimes, but in those days, nobody took them seriously. It was just, rhetoric. But for some reason, they thought, no, we have promised to do this now, we have to do it. And so it became a serious proposition. So that's how suddenly the Employment Guarantee Act, which nobody, not in our wildest dreams until 2004, would we have thought that this could actually happen. I mean, certainly not in our lifetime. And then suddenly it became a serious proposition. And the National Advisory Council was formed for the purpose of advising the government on how to implement this CMP, the Common Minimum Program. The first item on the agenda in the first meeting in July 2004 was the Employment Guarantee Act and, of course, the Right to Information Act. The two came together, partly because we understood that without the Right to Information, this Employment Guarantee Act couldn't work. And, of course, also because the Right to Information Act is so important in its own right. So then the National Advisory Council prepared the draft, submitted it to the government in August 2004. Then it went through a whole process of deliberation within and outside the government. This is important to say because it contrasts so sharply with the manner in which the act has been repealed in a single day earlier this month. So there was deliberation in the government, in the PMO, in various ministries, in public also, and then a much weaker version of the act was tabled in Parliament on 21st December 2004. And then after that, there was a whole campaign to demand the reinstatement of the key safeguards, including, for instance, that the act should come into force through the whole of India within three years. That had been removed. And meanwhile, of course, the bill went to a standing committee which incidentally was chaired by Kalyan Singh from the
I know.
BJP, included the MPs from all parties. So again, thorough deliberations, many depositions from citizens, organizations, and so on. And then after the standing committee submitted its report, which was very good, the bill came back to Parliament and was again discussed for several weeks until it was finally passed unanimously in August 2005. So the point I'm making is that it was basically the culmination of a long process in which social movements, political parties, workers' organizations, of course, the Parliament, Standing Committee, PMO, and so on, made important contributions. And that's such a contrast with the way in which the bill has now been repealed brutally within a day without prior notice and without discussion and without being referred to a standing committee.
Now, while listening to you, something has come to my mind, which is not in this set of questions sent to you. Now, uh, when PV Narasimha Rao government was there, at that time,
Sorry,
one
when?
month, PV Narasimha Rao government,
Yes.
when Manmohan Singh was the finance minister, and when the
Yes.
new liberal economic policy was implemented in the country, and then so one is the one is this side, new liberal economy is this side, and the rural employment generation and etc on the other side. So if you go a little back, then the kind of atmosphere created in the country because of the new liberal economy, because of the introduction of the new liberal economy, how the poorer section of the people, how the marginalized section of the people, they were further marginalized. This, if we can say that this was an attempt to safeguard their livelihood, bring in some parity. Can we also say like that?
I think it's more than safeguarding their livelihood. You see, we have to see the Employment Guarantee Act as part of a larger set of legislations that also include the Right to Information Act, later on the National Food Security Act, the Forest Rights Act, the Right to Education Act, and so on and so forth. And so the effort in these social legislations was to give expression to the directive principles of the Constitution and to turn social and economic rights into legally enforceable entitlements. That vision was there in the Constitution, but then it was later forgotten. And so you're right, that this can be seen as a counter to the neoliberal program of leaving people to their own devices. That I would agree. But it's a little more than allowing them to survive. It's also trying to empower them and trying to help them to organize, because we must remember that the workforce in India is 90% in the informal, unorganized sector.
They are
And
not organized here.
one of the important ideas of the Employment Guarantee Act is that it would enable the unorganized workers, at least in rural areas, to organize. That has not happened to the extent that we were hoping, but it has happened in some places. And where it has happened, the results have been very impressive. So that
Yes.
process could still consolidate itself, except that it's not there anymore.
Now you have actually now my question have cleared the issue further, because it is actually in a sense whatever was said in the preamble of the Constitution. So it is in a way actually taking that to the people and actually implementing those spirits, those aspirations, and expanding the aspirations and seen in the preamble of the Constitution. So it is something actually very
Yes.
vital and very important. Important. It was a very
Yes.
vital and important act, and it was great. It was really, it was something good that it was named after Mahatma Gandhi, who always emphasized on elevating
Ma-
the rural poor.
Mahatma Gandhi came later. The
Okay,
name Mahatma Gandhi came in 2009, later after
okay,
the act
later,
was
later.
passed,
Okay,
3 years
okay,
later.
okay, okay,
But I think the idea, uh, in fact, we were not in favor at that time of changing the name because we thought it was an unnecessary complication. But I think that the intention of adding that name was to convey that this is an act beyond political parties. It's a national initiative in the national interest. And so
yeah,
to avoid the act having a partisan character, I think that was the idea. So to that extent, I think it was a good idea. And that idea, unfortunately, has been defeated now by this new act, which has a partisan ring.
yes. Now, before I go to the new act, I would like to, you have explained a little bit, but then I would like to mainly, I would request you to explain the main features of MNREGA. Main features. What actually it stood for and what its objective, what are the basic features of MNREGA.
So the key entitlement in the MGNREGA, the MNREGA, is the right to ask for work without any condition. You don't have to prove that are poor. You don't have to prove that you're unemployed. It's basically any adult in rural areas has a right to demand work on local public works. And then employment has to be provided within 15 days. And if no employment is provided, then that person is entitled to an unemployment allowance of 1/4 of the wage in the first 30 days, and after that, one half. That's the basic entitlement. There are also other important entitlements like the payment of wages within 15 days, basic worksite facilities, compensation if you're not paid on time, and so on and so forth. So it's a set of entitlements, and these social legislations, not just MNREGA, but also the Employment, the Food Security Act and the Right to Information Act and so on, they're quite different from other laws because the intention here is not to make the citizen accountable to the state, but more to make the state accountable to the citizen. And so one thing I've learned from these legislations is that if you want that to work, you have to load the act very much in favor of the
To
people,
the
and in
people.
this case of the workers, yeah, because the system is very hostile to them, you see. And this is a very important qualification to this whole thing. But you were right to say that it was a visionary act and so on, and quite revolutionary actually. But it's being implemented by a system which is very hostile to poor people and to working people in particular. And that's why it's a constant battle to get it implemented. And that's why the achievements are not as great as what was hoped at that time. So the battle is far from over. But if you want to win that battle, then in the act itself, you have to load things as much as possible in favor of the workers. So there are many provisions that define the workers in the act itself. It doesn't leave it to the rules or to the orders and so on. It puts it right there, and also provisions that try to create accountability from the state. For example, the unemployment allowance is one example, that if you don't provide work, then you have to provide the unemployment allowance. Similarly, if you don't pay the wages on time, you have to pay the compensation and so on. Now, unfortunately, once again, the tendency of the state is to try to escape these accountability provisions. So these provisions have been weakened uh, when the act started being implemented. So again, it's a constant battle. But there was a time, this is important to mention too, for the benefit of viewers who were not around at that time, that there was a time in the first 5 or 6 years of the act when the act was actually not doing badly at all. There was a lot of hope and energy and enthusiasm at that time, and there was quite a fair amount of success in curbing corruption. And so by 2011, 2012, the results were actually quite impressive. And we have evidence, we have a lot of evidence of that, in particular from national household surveys like the National Sample Survey and also the India Human Development Survey. These surveys confirmed that the act was generating more than 2 billion percentage, more than 200 crores percentage of employment every year, and that about half of the workers were women, about 40% belonged to SC/ST families, and there was also a lot of evidence of the effect on poverty, on nutrition, reducing distress migration, creating productive assets, and so on and so forth. There was a certain amount of regional imbalance in the sense that a lot of work was generated in about 6 or 7 states like Rajasthan, Chhattisgarh, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, and so on. In some other states, including, unfortunately, some of the poorer states, the employment levels were still quite low. But the hope at that time was that the success of the leader states, if you like, would gradually extend to the other states as well. Now, unfortunately, from around 2013-14 onwards, there was some decline, I think, in the implementation standards, particularly because of the imposition of inappropriate technologies like Aadhaar-based payments, and then later on the National Mobile Monitoring System and so on, and also growing centralization in the program and the chronic failure to put in place a reliable and timely payment system. I mean, the delays in wage payments have continued year after year, and not just delays, sometimes workers not being paid at all and so on. That has created a terrible discouragement effect. I see it very clearly in Jharkhand, where I live, that many workers have lost interest in the program because of payment problems and because the wages are so low. You know, in the early years of the program, the NREGA wages were higher than market wages in most places. So it was a very attractive form of employment. Today, they're much lower because the wages have been frozen in real terms for 15 years. So this combination of low wages, delays, and sometimes non-payment of wages, all this has really undermined the interests of workers. And when workers are not interested, you cannot save the program. And so the implementation standards have really declined. And I'm afraid that corruption is returned in a big way in the last 10 years, in spite of all these technological safeguards, and sometimes facilitated by some of these technological innovations like the Aadhaar-enabled payment system.
No, that means actually that was my third question. But then third question you have already answered. But because my third question was, over the past 2 decades, how has MNREGA impacted India's rural poor, especially women, Dalits, and Adivasis? What were its biggest successes in reducing the stress and empowering communities, and what ongoing challenges did it face? I think you have answered this question, but then if you
I'll
want to
add,
additionally
yeah,
want
I'll
to
add one
say
point.
something.
I'll add, I'll add one important point, which is that in the areas where the workers have been able to use this act as an organizational opportunity, firstly, the results that I've already talked about have been much greater, you know, the impact on poverty, the employment levels, the reduction of distress migration, and so on and so forth. But we have also seen a dramatic empowerment effect. I'll give you one example. I mean, one of the places where workers have really been able to mobilize around this act is the Muzaffarpur in Bihar. And it's really extraordinary to see women, especially, it's mainly women because the men are mainly migrant workers, but the women who have taken up this employment guarantee opportunity and mobilized around it. You know, Dalit women who used to stay at home, have very few opportunities to earn their own income, very little experience of collective action, very little understanding of what was going on in the world. Suddenly now they are all out of their houses, working on these work sites, earning a fair amount of money, and demonstrating non-stop for employment, for timely payment, for higher wages. They think nothing of doing a dharna for 1 week, 2 weeks, a whole month. So they have become very vocal, very assertive, very confident, and quite well informed about their rights. So it's really amazing to see that transformation. And if that had happened on a larger scale, and it can still happen on a large scale, except that the act is not there anymore, this is a very important aspect of the act, I think, in addition to all the better known benefits in terms of poverty reduction and so on.
Please don't mind if I use a word, because while listening to you, this is what something was going inside me. And I would, in today's time, I would like to call you a messiah of the poor,
No, no,
a
no, please.
messiah of the deprived.
I don't believe in messiahs.
Okay, you don't believe in, but then okay, someone who advocates, who upholds their causes,
But
because
Paresh, many more other people have been part of this movement.
I understand. But then the while
And
listening to you,
the people who fight for this on the ground, I mean, they are doing a lot more, and they are doing a
yes,
lot, doing it at a much greater cost. Remember, you know, a lot of people have even lost their lives fighting corruption. In Jharkhand alone, maybe 10, 12 people have been killed by contractors who are trying to make money and so on. So these people are doing far more. But anyway, let's not go into
no,
that.
I understand. I understand the way you were articulating these things. It's yeah, of course, I would not concentrate on one person. But the kind of situation we are facing all around us today,
Yes,
listening to such things, hearing such things, discussing these things, these have become actually deserving of literature, actually pushed to the background. We do not hear such dialogue and discussion these days.
you're right.
That is why I was
You're
feeling.
right. You're right that the entire process through which this act came about in 2004 would not be possible today because there's no
It is
space.
just it everything, all those aspirations, all those objectives, all those aims have become just the antithesis of the present time and the present regime. That is
Yes.
what I'm saying. And that is why I actually, while
Right.
listening to you inside, I was not able to articulate my feelings properly, but something was going inside. I was feeling so sad inside me, that what was the objective and what has happened now. That's really very, very sad,
Absolutely. Very
extremely
sad.
sad.
And
Now, yeah.
yeah, go ahead. Yeah, yeah.
Now, my next question, that is the question number 4. The new VBZ Act. It's difficult for me to even pronounce these things.
Yes.
claims Claims to modernize the scheme by increasing guaranteed days to 125 days. Apparently, earlier it was 100 days. Now they're saying 125 days, and aligning it with Bikshit Bharat goals. This Bikshit Bharat thing, I don't understand. I, Bikshit Bharat goals, but critics argue it dilutes. That's the important point. But the critic argue it dilutes the original guarantee. What, in your view, is the real agenda behind the present NDA government's decision to replace MGNREGA entirely? This is the now we come to the core issue of the interview. Why did they replace this most progressive
Yeah.
uh,
So,
act?
yeah. So I'll come to why it's being replaced, but let's first be clear about this new act and what it does. Firstly, it repeals MGNREGA, the MGNREGA, and not only the act, but everything, the orders, guidelines, schemes, notifications, everything that has been built on this act is being repealed. Not from today, but from the day when the new scheme comes into effect. And this new scheme is basically a centrally sponsored scheme at the discretion of the central government. Whatever the central government decides will apply. They are keeping all the power to decide where and when the scheme applies, the power to determine the financial allocations, the power to set the wage rate, everything. And the central government under this act, so far as I can see, does not have a single significant obligations. All the obligations, such as they are, have been palmed off to the state governments. For example, it's the state governments who have to provide employment, they have to pay the unemployment allowance, they have to pay compensation if the wages are delayed, and they have to even ensure financial adequacy because under this new scheme, the central government will determine state-wise so-called normative allocations, which are de facto ceilings on expenditure. And within that ceiling determined by the central government will pay 60% of the costs. And beyond that, the state governments will have to pay 100%. So you can imagine that very few state governments will want to go beyond that. That's why I say it's a de facto ceiling. So even the responsibility to ensure financial adequacy is with the state governments. So basically this act is being converted into a scheme at the discretion of the central government, including the discretion to notify where and when the scheme comes into force. This is what we call a switch-off clause. And that's why I don't think this qualifies as an Employment Guarantee Act, because it's like saying that I give you a work guarantee, but I don't guarantee that the guarantee is going to be applicable. So that's not really a guarantee. So this is why we're so opposed to this act. And as far as this 125 days is concerned, this is just to sweeten the pill. You know, it's just a sop to sweeten the pill. It's not going to make much difference to anybody because very few people get 100 days in the first place. Only 2% of rural households in India get 100 days of employment under MGNREGA. And so those are the ones who stand to gain from a higher limit. But the 98% who are not getting 100 days, they are not going to benefit if the ceiling is raised. So it's just a symbolic sop. And on top of that, of course, there's no guarantee that the money will be there to raise the ceiling in any case. So on the one hand, you're saying that you raise the ceiling, but on the other hand, you're putting financial restrictions that go the other way. So it's really just to sweeten the pill, and we should not be misled by that. The central government is making very good use of this red herring to create the impression that the employment guarantee is being revamped when actually it's being repealed and dismantled. Now, about the intention, you're saying, what are they trying to do? I don't know. I can't read their mind. And this has been done with such secrecy that one can only guess. I think that what is happening is that they want to weaken the employment guarantee further, if not finish it off. I mean, the BJP has been hostile to employment guarantee right from 2014 onwards. In fact, as soon as the NDA government came to power in 2014, they tried to restrict the employment guarantee, first of all, by confining it to specific districts and then by imposing ceilings on expenditure and so on. They had to backtrack under public pressure, but they are coming back now with a vengeance with even worse restrictions. So I think it's an attempt to restrict the employment guarantee because they never really supported it. It's basically a business-sponsored government, and the business sector has never been in favor of employment guarantee because obviously the business sector is never in favor of anything that empowers the working class and helps the workers to have more bargaining power. I think that's the game plan. It's conceivable that the game plan is actually to try to make this work and to make sure that the credit goes to Modi, a little bit like they have done with the National Food Security Act. If you remember, the National Food Security Act provides for subsidized food rations for 2/3 of the population, and then the Modi government added a very small additional subsidy and made it free rations, and is now trying to claim the credit for giving free rations to 80 crore people when actually this comes mainly from the National Food Security Act. So it's conceivable that in a similar way, they are going to try to make this work and take credit for it. But I don't think so, and I don't think that they will succeed if that is the plan, because they don't know how to make this work. As it is, they have already made a mess in the last 10 years, and I think it's going to get worse with the new dispensation, the new restrictions, the continued emphasis on technologies that are not really appropriate for this purpose and so on. And so I think whatever the intention, the result is going to be big decline in the employment guarantee program and maybe over time uh, de facto phasing out.
Two things I just want to raise here.
Yeah,
One is that, you see, whatever tax they have been bringing in the recent times, that means since 2014, all tax and everything, there's a philosophy, and uh, which underlines that there should be central control. Everything
yes,
should be everything should be centrally controlled.
absolutely.
And it actually, India is a vast country.
Yes,
And where does the center, what is the center? If the peripheries don't hold the center, what is the meaning of center? So is it also against the you see the federal spirit and structure of
yes,
our constitution?
yes, absolutely. In fact, you can make a case that this act is unconstitutional, I think. I mean, that's what my lawyer friends tell me, because it unilaterally imposes a legally binding financial burden on the states without any consultation. You see, let me give you an example to illustrate how extreme this imposition is. Suppose that the central government decides that Tamil Nadu doesn't require any central support for this employment guarantee, and suppose that it sets the wage rate in Tamil Nadu at 4,000 rupees a day, right? So no financial support for 4,000 rupees a day. Then the government of Tamil Nadu will have a legal obligation to provide 125 days of employment at 4,000 rupees a day, paying the cost fully. And if not employment, then an unemployment allowance of 1,000 rupees a day. Obviously, this is impossible. So the central government has the power to bankrupt any state government, and it would be within its rights under this act if it were to do so, right? So, so this unilateral imposition of financial burden violates the Constitution because, as I understand it, Article 258 of the Constitution says that if the central government imposes this sort of financial burden unilaterally on the states, there has to be some consultation. It has to be by some kind of mutual agreement, as was done originally with the National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. There was consultation with the states, and then there was this formula where the central government pays the wages and three-quarters of the material costs, and then the states contribute one-fourth of the material cost. This was done by agreement. So you can challenge, I think you can challenge this constitutionality of the act. Whether you should do that, go to court and so on, one can debate. But yes, it is a violation of certainly the federal spirit and possibly also the constitution, the provisions of the constitution.
Yeah, because it is everything. There is a contact between India is
Yes.
a contact between the states and the center. So you literally violate that context and try to take everything in your hands.
Yeah.
And what actually comes out from this discussion, whatever we have discussed today, we have not uttered that word. But then what it seems is that everything has its political implications. It's not about actually empowering people or actually generating employment. It is all loaded with political implications.
Of
Am
course.
I am I
Yeah,
right in reading that?
absolutely. Absolutely. All this is political. There's no doubt about it, including the name.
Name.
Yeah.
And now coming to the name. Now I have only just very uh, small, very brief two questions, very short, brief two questions. One is, why did they, you see, Mahatma Gandhi, as we discussed at the beginning, so Gandhi was always for empowering the villages. village.
Sorry?
Gandhi was Mahatma Gandhi was always for empowering the villages. So now this scheme was very rightly, maybe towards the it happened in 2009, but still this scheme was named very rightly after Gandhi. Now, why did they change? Why did they remove Gandhi from the name, from this new scheme? What was their objective?
I think I guess you have to ask them, not me. But
Now, what? How do you see it? How do you see it? What? Why did
they
they
have
do that?
never, Hindutva has never liked Gandhi. If you want to understand policies of the central government, you have to understand the ideology of Hindutva. And
So this
they
is for
never,
the first
sorry?
directly they're attacking directly. It is an onslaught on Gandhi and Gandhi's actually thoughts, if I can say so.
Yeah. You see, I think this name was also a little bit of a red herring in the sense that it's not the main point. And too many opposition leaders have uh, focused their fury on the name when the content was more important. So I'm less concerned about the name than the
Name.
content. But I do think that this change of name is objectionable because it gives a partisan color to an act that was meant to be beyond parties. To me, that's the important thing. And of course, you can also connect this new name with the communal tendencies of the BJP and so on. That's also quite worrying. Uh, Plus the imposition of Hindi, etc. So I think it's objectionable from several points of view. But we should not let the debate about a name distract our attention from the more important issue of the
Yes,
content
absolutely.
and the fact that the
Absolutely.
guarantee is being undermined and
Yes,
that the
yes,
central
yes.
government is
Yeah,
taking charge of
yeah,
everything.
yeah. That is my last question. This is my last question. Now, whatever we have discussed so far, now employment, this scheme, this act, because we started with the origins of the act, this scheme, this important scheme, and now we have come to the conclusion, and you have already said that okay, so the scheme is there, this act is there, and I think with the act, its objectives and aspirations are also dead. Now, what would be its implication for India, for the rural poor, for the Adivasis, for the Dalits, for the other marginalized sections of the people? This is, I want this to be the concluding remarks from your side.
Well, I think this is a huge setback for all of us, but of course, especially for marginalized sections, because they are the ones who were participating in this program. Uh, about 40%, as I said, about 40% of workers are from SC/ST families, and probably more than 90% are from SC/ST.
So, thank you very much, Professor Drèze, for sharing such wonderful thoughts with us.